All right, I'm going to label this as multiplying radicals. Multiplying radicals. On a worksheet that you turned in, and that was graded, you had something like this. The square root of 6 times the square root of 8 minus the square root of 6. Okay? Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
What did you do to do this? So use the distributive property, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is the square root of 6 times the square root of 8?
40.
Square root of 48. Minus, what's the square root of 6 times the square root of 6?
36.
Square root of 36. Okay? Now, the next thing you have to do is simplify the radicals if you can. What perfect square goes into 48? 16. So that's 16 times 3. Minus, and the square root of 36. 36 is already a perfect square, so what's the square root of 36? 6. What's the square root of 16?
4.
So what's the answer?
4
All right. Now, that was on a worksheet that you had turned in. Okay? Now, let's talk about this that you need to know in your final. What if you had this? The square root of 3 minus 2 times the square root of 3 plus 2. You're multiplying these radicals, except now you're dealing with two binomials. What method are you going to use to multiply this out? FOIL. FOIL. Okay? So let's talk about the first. What's the square root of 3 times the square root of 3? Which is? 3. Good. What's the outer? What's the square root of 3 times 2? And don't say square root of 6.
2 square root of 3.
Very good. 2 square root of 3. What is a negative 2 times the square root of 3? Negative 2 square root of 3. And the last, what's the negative 2 times the positive 2? Okay, so that's where I'm at. So remember when you multiply two binomials and use FOIL, you end up with how many terms? 4. Now, let's see if we can combine any of them. Can I combine any of those terms?
Yeah.
Yes, the out and the inner. What's a positive 2 square root of 3 and a negative 2 square root of 3? 0. So I'm left with 3 minus 4. Can I combine that?
Yes.
What's the answer?
Negative 1.
-1. Okay? Let's look at this one. What if you had the square root of 5x minus 2 times the square root of 5x plus 3? Okay? Square root of 5x minus 2 times the square root of 5x plus 3. FOIL. Okay? Square root of 5x times the square root of 5x. Don't make it difficult on yourself. Think. The square root of 5x times the square root of 5x. 25x squared. That's the square root of 25x squared. Now that takes us back to something you've had before. 5x. Very good. That's just 5x. Because the square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of x squared is just x. So that's 5x. What's the outer? Square root of 5x times 3. Very good. What's the inner? Yep. And what's the last?
Negative 6.
Yep. Can I combine anything?
Yes.
Yes, the middle 2. I have how many square root of 5x's altogether? I have 3 and a negative 2, so altogether I have how many? 1. 3 square root of 5x minus 2 square root of 5x is 1 square root of 5x. Okay, so I'm going to get 5x plus square root of 5x minus 6. Y'all can see this?
Yep.
So I have to have three terms at this point, right? So I went from 4 times any? 3. Can I combine anything else? No. Okay, so that's your answer. Okay? Can y'all do those two that I have here, that I pointed? Okay, so if you can do those two, then you'll be fine for the one that's on your final. Okay? All right, so in terms of this study guide, that's this right here. All right, the only thing we didn't get to is this one. Well, it's on your test, I just won't count it. You just won't do it. All right?
Bonus? Yeah.
No, you're not gonna, because you're gonna have to spend some time to understand this. This would take about 30 minutes. Because what happens when you solve this rational equation, you remember one of the things that you did was find the LCD of rational expressions? Except this time this is a rational equation, so you still have to find the LCD, but then you would multiply both sides by the LCD. So it's a bunch of steps. Well, you need to not have problems finding the LCD because that's on your final. Okay?
Did I have problems on my test?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just saying. You better not have problems because it's on your final. All right. Rationalizing the denominator is just this. Okay, look. The square root of 3 divided by the square root of 5. That's what this one is. So when you rationalize the denominator, it means that you want to make it rational. Remember we said a while ago that the square root of 5 is what kind of number? Rational or irrational? Square root of 5. It's irrational. You have a square root. When you have a square root, it's irrational. So when it says rationalize the denominator, that means you want to make the denominator what kind of number? Rational. Square root of 5 is not rational, it is irrational. But there's a quick fix to make it rational. Remember, what you do to the numerator, you have to do to what? The denominator. So all you do is multiply the numerator and the denominator by the denominator. So what's the square root of 3 times the square root of 5? And what's the square root of 5 to the square root of 5? Which is 5. And 5 is now what kind of number? Rational. So there's your answer. So what I'm going to do is for that one, and that's 8 points. So for that one, I'll have a like a little sheet with about 2 other problems like this, and then I'll give that to you to use. Just like in the last test where I gave you that sheet. All right. So don't worry about this one. I'll have a little handout to where I'll have about 2 or 3 examples and you can use that. But it's 8 points. It's easy to do. See how easy it is?
According to you, everything's easy.
It is. You're right. So what if you had this? What if you had the square root of 6 divided by the square root of 8? How would you rationalize the denominator?
36 divided by square root of what?
8. What would you have to do to rationalize the denominator? First of all, remember, rationalizing the denominator means you want the denominator to be what kind of number? Rational. Right now, the square root of 8 is what kind of number? Irrational. How do I make that denominator rational? Multiply numerator and denominator by that denominator. So what's the numerator? Square root of what? 48. What's the denominator now? 8. Square root of 64, which is what? 8. But you want to simplify the square root of 48. Is there a perfect square? Yeah, 4 goes into 48, right? 4 times what?
3.
No, 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 9 is not 48.
Isn't 16 times 3?
Oh, yes. Okay, so 16 is the largest. Thank you. Yep.
3 over 8.
Yeah, 16 is the largest. So square root of 16 is 4, right? So you had 4 square root of 3 over 8. But then I can reduce the 4 and the 8.
Yes.
So what's the answer?
2 square root 3 over 4?
No,
It is square root of 3 over 2.
You know what, wait.
Because what you did was you divided by 2. What do 4 and 8 have in common besides 2? 4.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, you know, the back, yeah.
Yeah.
Square root of 3 over 4.
Yeah, they're right there.
It's not gonna-
Square root of 3 over 2. 4 into 4 is 1. 4 into 8 is 2.
So square root of 3 over 4.
Square root of 3 over 2.
Over 2.
And what's 30 seconds from now? Is it square root of 3 over 4? Square root of 30 seconds from now, you can do the same thing. Square root of 3 over 4. No, 2.
That's because I'm in this zone and y'all are all out of my zone. Can we get our test back now?
Yes.
Thank you. You said no.